Welcome to another conversation on the future of commuting with myself, Dahi the Butler from Park Office. Today we are joined by Manuel from Echo G. How are you doing, Manuel?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
Very good. Thanks a million for joining us. So, Manuel, do you want to kick things off by telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Manuel. I'm the COO of Echo G and one of the founders. I'm based in Munich at the moment, working from home office.
Perfect. So do you want to tell people a little bit about, I suppose, obviously you're an expert in kind of electric vehicles, and do you want to tell people a little bit about, I suppose, electric vehicles and where the industry is at the moment?
That's a good point. I think I recently said it in an interview. There is the third wave of electric mobility happening in the last 2 decades. And for this time, we believe it's for real, because when you look at how the automotive companies are embracing it, and I'm not only talking about Tesla, but about everybody else, I think the momentum is there, and you see that they are decreasing timelines. Cities are starting to impose rules on cars not driving into the inner cities with combustion engine. Certain countries impose bans on the sale of combustion engine vehicles. So there is a lot of momentum in the market. And we see that on the infrastructure side as well. It's kind of the projections are skyrocketing. I think every month the projection is doubled of the units that are put out on the streets when we talk about charging stations, but also when it's about the financial volume of the market itself. So it's some very interesting times. It's still a little bit Wild West, but we are happy to be in that market.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And so, Manuel, what does this changing market mean for employers? I suppose we like to look at the issue of commuting here. So how is this going to change how companies, I suppose, manage commuting moving forward?
Yeah, it's a very interesting aspect. And when you talk about who will be the early adopters or where is charging happening, so everybody thinks about the home first, yeah? But I'm not so sure about it, because imagine if you live in an urban or more denser area, not everybody can put up a charging station, and not everybody needs it, because, well, a full charge today is, 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers. And on average, what do? We go 25 kilometers to work, and back. This is the daily commute of most of the people, I think 85% or something like that. So if I don't have a charger at home, where do I charge? And the workplace is probably the choice number one that everybody would reply to. The second one is going to be the supermarket or some other locations where I go and do something else. So for an employer, it's going to be super interesting to select what kind of charging solutions do I want to offer? What kind of charging solutions do I have to offer? And how do I integrate them? How do I integrate it with parking management? How do I integrate it with building management, load management, and so on and so forth? And I think these are the big challenges that an employer is facing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting to watch moving forward. And I suppose overall, in the scheme of kind of the changing world of mobility, so obviously a lot of airwaves are kind of dedicated to the question of how we're going to travel moving forward. One thing that kind of comes up around electric vehicles is, although from an emissions perspective there's massive benefits, there still is potential drawbacks when it comes to congestion. Do you want to talk a little bit about your perspective on that question?
That's a good one. I think kind of putting everybody into an electric vehicle is not solving the congestion problem at all. It solves the pollution problem, maybe. I think we have to, and this is something when you look at the current times, you realize that we don't have to go to the office every day. And there are particular jobs, particularly when I look at our organizations of colleagues that have to go there every day because they work with the hardware, they need a dedicated environment, and so on and so forth. But somebody like me, I don't have to go to the office every week, even. Like I think it's enough if I'm there every second week or something like that. I think this is going to change. You will, for me, commuting is turning into something where I have a reason to go to the office, and if I have a reason, I'll go. If I don't have a reason, I don't go. And this kind of follows or falls back on a lot of things like how do we live, what kind of apartment size do we need, where do we live, and so on and so forth. And that's going to be super interesting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fascinating, even to see how people return to offices and how
Yes.
they kind of inhabit them kind of moving forward. You've kind of touched on there, you know, COVID obviously has been a massive disruptor for a lot of industries. How has that impacted the electric, I suppose, vehicle space, and more particularly you guys with EcoG?
Well, I think on the electric vehicle space, it surprisingly fueled the change or the transformation when you look at the recent announcements. What it definitely speeded up is the introduction of infrastructure, and particularly the UK or other markets where like really now we are going to invest in the electric vehicle future. For us, as we currently work mostly with hardware manufacturers that build charging stations, of course, there has been a bit of delay in the production of the charging stations and in the manufacturing. But when I look at the order books, they are full. They are getting fuller every day, and they are increasing their volume predictions almost every week. And that's very good for us. I think it's very good for the industry itself. Let's see how that reflects on the distribution or the market penetration of electric mobility in general.
And what do you think is driving that growth? Is it a kind of an increasing awareness of we can't go back to traveling how we used to, or where's this kind of coming from?
I think it's a mix. I think people realize that okay, we had to change. I think it was not a how you say a happy decision to not go to the office anymore, but kind of we were grounded a little bit like being grounded as a child. So now you have to stay home. It was long enough that we got used to it. I think this is the first change. The second change is governments are pouring tons of money into charging infrastructure, particularly charging infrastructure right now. German government is, for example, increasing it up to 400 million for the support of home charging. And at the same time, some regulation are imposed on supermarkets and semi-public, semi-private spaces when you are about the percentage of parking spots with a charging capability. And that forces, for example, discounter chains or supermarket chains to equip up to 25% of of parking spots with charging stations. And that then fuels another kind of level of growth. And that's what we currently see. And it's really good for us, particularly because it takes charging away from the highways and brings it back into the cities and brings it into almost daily life of the people.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very interesting. I suppose one final question. You've touched there upon the role of regulation in helping to accelerate change, particularly in Germany. How important overall do you feel regulation is, or should companies and employers in particular be taking more of a proactive approach now to avoid more stringent regulations down the road?
Well, I believe, and maybe that's a little bit the environmental activist in me. I believe we all know what is happening to our climate. So I think we should do it out of a voluntary basis. But of course, it costs money at the beginning. And money is always a scarce resource for somebody who is following an economic approach. So you need government regulations, or you need incentives to put a positive tone on government regulations, to kind of support people in putting it up. I believe we should be way more proactive, because it's amazing to drive an electric vehicle, but we are not, and so there is regulation happening at a certain point in time.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on. But thanks a million for your time today, anyway, Manuel.
Thanks for having me.